So my topic is physical layer design and analysis of the network-centric cognitive radio, which is better known as WinC2R. This thesis is divided into 6 sections. First, we'll go through the WinC2R top and how it implements a virtual flow. Then we'll go to the actual hardware realization of this system onto the FPGA. Here I'll explain the transmit-receive flow for what we implemented for 82.11a Lite. By Lite, it means it's not a fully grown or fully blown 82.11a transmitter and receiver. We'll dig into the processing engines, which are the modulator, demodulator, checker, and you'll see how are they verified. And how does this design cater to the virtual flow? Then we look into an important aspect. It's the software on WinC2R, which actually makes this platform a cognitive radio. We look into the timing analysis of these processing engines, and then look into further improvement of these designs. Let's start off with WinC2R and the virtual flow pipeline. Just like another cognitive radio platform, WinC2R has a lot of features. First, being programmability and reconfigurability. So what WinC2R does is it implements all the radio functionality in hardware, and most of the programming is done by software. It caters to all, it can cater to other wireless protocols, and it has the ability to shift between protocols very quickly and on the fly. This is because we have implemented independent signal processing applications, where every application has a processor of its own, and it need not use any other resource. This system is also scalable. You can add and remove these signal processing units dynamically, as in on the fly. We call these processing units as functional units, and they have this plug-and-play feature. And because of all these points, we are able to implement complex algorithms on. We can implement algorithms on this platform, something like spectrum allocation or SNR-based adaptation, even per packet protocol adaptation. So all these things are possible because of the virtual flow pipelining. Now, traditional radios have a hardware pipelining model, which means most of the functional units or the data processors are embedded into hardware, and these connections between them are physical, as in they are physically connected in the hardware. Because of this, you have a fixed order of FU activation. FU is the function unit. These systems are designed for only the protocols that they are designed for, and there's only one single flow. As you can see, it does not cater to future developments of wireless protocols. Now, an improvement over this is the virtual flow pipelining. We see similar function units, but in hardware. But the connections here are not done in software. So this can be used like there's another virtual layer sitting above these guys, who actually manages the resources and generates a connection between them. So now we have a programmable order of FU activations, which means I can program these connections. We have a program selection. I can add or remove any of the function unit based on what environment I have. Coexistence of multiple flows. As you can see, first frame has this path. Second frame can have a different path with other configuration. So this pipelining stage really helps us to achieve the programmability. This is a more elaborated diagram of the virtual flow, more like its manifestation on WinC2R. These are functional units that I mentioned in the previous slide. In this case, we have like MAC and modulator. They have, as you can see, they are self-sufficient and they are independent of each other. They do not have any physical connection, but they are only connected to the common bus that they share. You, as a software, you're sitting on the other end of the bus, so you can send commands like send frame to the MAC-TX or any other functional unit. You can do some parameter setting in these register maps. I'll come to those details in the future slides. Next task, you can even tell those guys what will be your next task, and based on which the control unit will transfer the output buffer contents to the input buffer. You can set up your ADC and DAC. So as you can see, there's a clear line here between hardware and software. And due to presence of function units in hardware, now we have dedicated processing for specific applications. So in case of GNU, if you see this line exists here, where your processing engines are coded in C, and these connections happen in Python script. So let's come to the actual implementation of WinC2R on FPGA. This is the top level diagram of the transmitter. As I said, we have implemented this as a proof of concept for 82.11a Lite. not a full-blown transmitter. We just have these function units. They are connected to a common processor which has the microblaze and the bus. The actual data processing happens in processing engine that sits inside a functional unit. The unit control module here is an important module in the function unit that interprets all these virtual flow commands that come from the software. Today's focus will be the modulator. So we have the function units here. Like MAC, actually that triggers the data flow. We have the frame header that appends the PLCP header. We have the modulator that modulates all these contents. And finally the I50 and transmit filter for to generate OFDM symbol. Now we have named tasks. Now since all these connections are virtual, we need to give them some task and some name. So you can set up these connections in software. Similar structure that we see is for receiver. As you can see, the function unit, the processor structure all remains the same. We just removed all the DAC interfaces and added AEC. And I've just plugged out all the transmitter blocks and plugged in the receiver blocks. As you can see, the demod checker, the synchronizer. And today's focus will be the demod and the checker. Just to go through the command flow for the receive, we have the packet timing F50, that's for the synchronizer. We have the demodulator that demodulates the incoming packet. We have the frame checker that validates the frame based on CRC, and the MAC does its MAC functionalities. So, focus for today's tasks will be the TX mod, which is a trigger for the modulator. You can see here, receiver has a lot of actions. You can plug many other actions to one receiver. This way, we can reduce the overhead by adding another processing engine for different tasks. In this case, we have two tasks for the header, one to demodulate and one to check the parity. And we have tasks for the data separate. But all of these tasks go to one processing engine. So your engine design should be such a way that they handle both tasks separately. So now let's go to the design of the processing engine. The main physical layer blocks are built in the processing engines, and they have to cater to the virtual flow and show their independencies. We'll first go to the modulator design. Modulator is essentially a lookup table. Input interface, as you can see on the left, are the command interface where we have a command decoder that will trigger based on this action. We have the parameter and data interface for the input buffer. The output buffer interface is on the right with the bus. The address decoder takes the incoming bits and sends an address to the mapping table. The mapping table has all the constellation points in a specific order so that this address decoder knows what bit is coming in. We have the mapper that forwards this modulated data to the output bus. And we have a bunch of status and control registers that are required for debugging and setup. So this is an important feature of the processing engine. This is a command parameters. It is a 32-bit word that contains the frame properties. And this word is tagged along with every chunk of data, with every task. So whenever a data comes in, it needs to have this information with it, like standard ID, which will tell me whether it's Wi-Fi or WiMAX. We have the code rate, the frame modulation, and the frame status bits. Frame status bit tells me which part, the chunk belongs to which part of the frame. So here, since this is shared by all processing engines, every data chunk is processed independently. So this modulator need not have any prior information of its previous chunk, or it need not pass this information to its next chunk. So we can set up multiple flows in this case, where the software sitting on top routes the packet such a way that you get alternate frames or something. So in this way, modulator need not worry what frame it belongs to or what flow it belongs to. It just has to read these guys and modulate the chunk accordingly. Now, how do you set up the mapping table? This is the standard 4 modulation schemes that the standard provides. So the mapping table has provision for 8 modulations. In this case, for Wi-Fi, all 4 modulation, and WiMAX, all 4 modulation. What you have to do is just fill these constellation points in these so that the address decoder can decode and forward the point value to the output buffer.
What is your difference between WiMAX and Wi-Fi in ESK?
Only these bits are interchanged, as in 0 becomes 1 and 1 becomes 0. And yeah, in this case. So in this case, we have 2 configurations, and you can set up however you want. It need not be this specific order. It could be, this is grayscale. You can even implement the regular method. So let's come to the receiver. Again, as you say, it's a processing engine, so it has a similar interface, one for the command, input data, and the output data here. Demodulator demodulates data, and the checker does the CRC checker. Again, demodulator comes with 32-bit of its own command parameters. These are all shared by all the processing engines, so that they have it has an idea what type of frame is coming in. So for modulator, we had the mapping table. So for demodulator, we'll have the decision table. So this table is synchronized with the modulator. So for that constellation, what we do is we write all the boundary values at the LSBs of this table. So what the demodulator does is, whenever a point comes to the right of this boundary, it will decode that and send the corresponding bit and write the corresponding bit. So again, as I said, this is synchronized with the modulator. So any changes in the modulator, the demodulator also undergoes the corresponding changes for the decisions.
So you assume scaled already, everything is scaled?
Yeah, so when you calculate these points, everything is energy normalized. But all those calculations are done by software. So based on what type of scaling you want, you can set up in software. All this has what happens is, from the software, those values come and get written into this map. So we reduce a lot of hardware complex.
You don't change that on the fly per chunk.
We can change that,
You can.
because between every chunk we have a gap, and you can. That's where the software can interfere and write to these blocks again.
Even the scaling, that's what.
Yeah, even the scale. So I'll come to the software. It will be much more clear there.
What is the size of the chunk?
So in this case, we have four OFDM symbols. So for VPSK, we have 6 32-bit words. It's like 48 bytes.
So I'm not very familiar with standard. I was wondering if there is a fact for our engines. I mean, you're doing a hard slicing.
Yeah.
So there's no Viterbi or any other.
No. So since this is as I said, it's 802.11a light version.
So you don't have it second.
We don't have a coder and the interleaver also, because we wanted to set up the system to show the virtual flow, and we will also run other resources. I'll come to those details in the future. Checker is a simpler block. What it does is there's a parity checker for the header. So and this parity passes the header that comes in, the PLCP header. This is again from the standard. The synchronizer detects an OFDM frame and sends these information to the demodulator. And here we come to know about the length and rate of the frame that is coming in. So what checker does is it stores that rate and the length information in the register map. So as a software, as a user, you can read these values for every chunk. So once these values are taken up by software, software can again set up multiple flows. It can set up, it can recognize different frames based on these values. So there is an interface, register map interface that allow us to see these values.
Can you change the chunk size on the fly?
Yes, you can change, because there is a in checker there is a register map that says number of OFDM symbols per chunk. You can make it 2, 4, or whatever.
But it's not what the checker decides, it's what you set up in the virtual flow, size of the chunk.
Yeah, virtual flow, and that value comes into the checker.
It's not hard coded in the checker. Right?
It's not hard coded. It comes from the software.
With every chunk.
With every chunk. Yeah.
With every command, especially.
Yeah, with every command. And then between commands, you can set up the software that tells to change them.
You don't even know whether it's a chunk or not.
Yeah.
It could be the whole frame.
Yeah, it could be the whole thing. In case
Inside
of,
these engines, you can know notion of the chunk.
yeah, it doesn't. It looks at the length actually. It continuously updates its length values. So when it reaches the end, it sends the end of date. The length calculator here in this case calculates the number of OFDM symbols associated with the frame, and then forwards it to the synchronizer for further analysis. And again, the demodulator here, RX demod is this block that calculates the CRC of the frame. So in this way, at the output interface, this processing engine is ready. The data is ready for the next module. This slide will tell you how we tested the processing engines. We had the MATLAB model that generated all the files required for the input and output buffer. So these files are actually, they mimic the input and output buffer. They mimic the input and output buffer. So we, the testbed manager here mimics a UCM type system where it triggers and sends the input to the processing engine. And then once the data is modulated, it writes the output buffer and it's compared with these output files. So this way we have tested the modulator and demodulator for all modulations up to 1.5 kilobytes range. So in this case, for 1.5K, around 22 chunks go for BPSK. Let's come to the software on WinSync. So this is the register map of the demodulator. I have just cropped this photo. So as you can see, it has a common bus interface to the user. And Xilinx provides us with read and write functions to these memories directly. So you have direct access to these memories like mapping table, register, and status register. And this helps us to set up most of things like the virtual flow. In this case, the UCM, the control module, has task descriptor tables which can be accessed through this bus. And you can write to them that will actually set up the virtual flow. You can write into control regions of the modulators and of any processing engine. You can calculate the constellation points. You need not hard code all those points and write them. You can let some function like fill mod table do those calculations, do the energy divisions, and also do some scaling, as in it need not be uniform scaling. And parallelly calculate the decision regions and again write into the demodulator. You can use it to set up ADC and DAC. So in this case, most of the algorithms can be set up here because of this window to the processing engine, you are able to configure the engines. Now let's come to the timing analysis. So this is the modulator latency that I've observed. In this case, as you see, it takes 52 cycles, 52 clock cycles to set up the modulation. So this is the region where you write into those memories. I mean, this could be here in the middle, where between two chunks you can set up another modulation table and then go ahead with the other chunk. 640 is the number of clock cycles it takes to modulate BPSK 4 ODM symbols. For individual ODM symbols, I have split it up here. This is the time gap between the two chunks, which is taken by other processing engines and
this is for 11A Lite.
Yeah, this is
because you started with WiMAX in 11A, but most of your talk is about 11A, right?
Yeah. But I mean, since there's not much change between WiMAX and Wi-Fi, because all you do is change these tables here,
Right.
and the modulation is again lookup table. So these numbers remain constant.
But the ODM size symbol is larger.
Yeah, ODM symbol is larger. So in this case, I have given 4. But this is again not hard coded for it. Any type number of ODM symbols can
Yeah,
have.
sure.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers are for byte, light. And when you look at chunk latency, we have 32 cycles for initialization, and then you see 96 clock cycles go for one word, that is 132-bit word. We'll come into these details in the next slides. Similarly, demodulator latency, we have a constant time that it's taken to pass the header. We have 887 clock cycles for one chunk, and again the mid-chunk latency. And now we have 128, and in this chunk latency, we see have 128 clock cycles going to generate a 32-bit word in BPSK. And then we have constant time for the checker. That's because for all 4 ODM symbols. And because I mean it's pretty much deterministic.
Chunk latency is actually your processing latency, right?
Yes, chunk latency is the processing latency.
So like if you were sort of saying, I want to change the chunk size, which things stay constant, which things change?
This remains constant because the header is constant. These things change. For example, now this chunk has 4 ODM symbols. So if you make it 2, you will get this. You will land up here beside. Because
So the header processing is the overhead essentially.
yeah, 100%. And within a chunk, we have overheads here also for command passing. So why are these numbers essential? First, they are helpful for system latency calculation. Since we are running on a dynamic module, virtual flow, the number of function units can be added or dropped on the fly. So numbers like this will help, since they are calculatable, as in you can calculate based on number of ODM symbols. The entire processing latency can be calculated before running the entire system. So if you have all the numbers for all processing engines, we can estimate its performance in time restricting environments like calculating SIFs or whether it falls within that threshold. We even come to how many bits are processed per second, and we also open some room for improvement. Since as you see, the chunk latency adds up more. It takes up most of the time in processing because there's a serial parsing of bits. To improve on that, I will show the parallel implementation where we are able to achieve reduction in latency. Now this is an observed modulator waveform that I picked up directly from the simulations. This is a clock that sits on the top. We have the action signal coming here from the command decoder. So that's where the modulator is triggered. We take some clock cycles to parse the command to come to know how many, what is the rate and modulation. And then after we set up the output buffer, our actual writing starts here, where you see there's one clock cycle to write one modulated data. And we have a dead time between two writing, which is 2 clock cycles. So here you can see it takes 3 clock cycles to modulate one data or to process one bit. So during this time, what we can do is we can have parallel modulators working, which fill up these gaps to write into the output buffer. And then implementation is similar to this, where the top level looks like this, where we have the input switch that feeds in bits continuously to the modulators, and this switch feeds. This is based on number of based on the modulation. We select the number of bits, and these are routed to the modulators. We have a control block that looks through all of the processing, and then output buffer now continuously writes to the output buffer, hence eliminating all the dead time. So with this, I've calculated the same. I've calculated the chunk latency now. So in this case, you can see there's a 69% reduction. For a 500 bit rate, what I've done is I've added up all the chunk latencies, what are 20 chunks that are in.
Does this depend on the modulation scheme?
Yes, this is for BPSK. These numbers depend on modulation because the chunk latency is different for.
Does the gain depend on the modulation?
No, not much. The average comes to around 69. The thesis document has all those values, so they apply around 68 to 70. So as you can see, there is a 1/3 drop in most of the processing time. This is because we have actually eliminated 2 cycles for every bit. So for huge frames like 1500, we have a huge drop in the latency. But this again comes with a cost. The FPGA utilization. So FPGAs are they basically contain components like function generators, slices, flip-flops, and RAMs. And every FPGA has a limited number of these components. So that area, so based on your design, it occupies some space on FPGA. So in this case, previous serial modulated took only 0.67% of the entire FPGA. But now we have almost jumped to 3 times because of having 3 separate processing engines. There is an increase in RAM because we have modulation tables for every gap. So this is the cost that you get when you do the parallel modulation. Now, demodulated waveform is also similar, but now we look at the input side. So here we get the action. We have some command passing here, and in this case, you see there are 3 dead clock cycles. That means between 2 modulated words, there is 3 clock cycle gap. Again, those gaps can be filled by parallel demodulators, and every bit can be processed at every clock cycle. In this case, there is even a big gap here between 2 words. As in, the first word is generated here because it passes through all the 32 bits, and then this gap also can be reduced. Similar structure is there for the parallel implementation of demodulator, where the input switch now continuously feeds the input buffer to the parallel demodulators. In this case, we see a very huge latency drop because we are now using 4 demodulators and we have eliminated 3 clock cycles for every bit. For example, in the 500 case, we have 17,000 clock cycles, which have dropped to 4,200 clock cycles. And we see the similar jump in the percentage utilized on FPGA, where it almost increases 4 times. I have converted all these values to rate since we're using a 50 megahertz clock on the system. We see that the modulator rate, that is the number of bits processed per second, in this case is 14. And once you use a parallel, it becomes 48. Similar for demodulator, we see those 4 times jumps in the processing rate.
So how do you calculate this?
So the entire processing time, the data divided by the entire processing time. So it includes all the headers, all the initialization that goes into processing this bit.
Just for the modulator?
Just for the modulator.
And for what's the clock speed?
This is 50 megahertz system clock. So if we increase that clock, we'll see better numbers here. But for WinC2R, we had to work on 50 megahertz clock to have the entire system. So we'll come to the conclusion and future work. We started off with the WinC2R top level design, which is essentially the hardware realization of the virtual flow pipelining. We implemented this for 82.118 Lite and Lite protocol, that is not a full blown 82.118 receiver. transmitter and receiver. We looked into the modulator, demodulator, and checker, and the processing engine design, how physical layer and layer should be designed to cater to this virtual flow. We looked into the software of InSituR. How do you set up, how it helps to set up data flow, and then how do you set up the modulator and demodulator by populating a mapping and decision tables. We looked into the latency analysis that will help us for future releases to estimate the performance. And then improvement of the serial modulator, which is the parallel modulator and demodulator. So this system spawns again more future work. First, we can support better moderation schemes. So since we were working on a proof of concept basis, I designed the modulator just for rectangular modulations. We can improve the design for circular modulations, having a similar lookup table and decision regions. The parallel implementation that I designed is not fully verified. I mean, I can go into verification of the entire design and actually implementing it on FPGA. We can reuse these engines in hardware. We can have blocks that will configure the modulator such a way that it can act like a coder or encryptor. Now, since most of the calculations happen in software and the processing engines are essentially lookup tables and decision regions, you can use some coding, some memory-less coding technique or encryption technique to use these engines. A lot of software development is yet to be done, which include generating traffic for the MACTX, generating frames, feedback paths, as in we can take values from sync, like energy values from sync, and give the feedback to the transmitter so that the energies of the modulator can be scaled. We can add more user friendliness. In this case, we actually hard code all the frames and modulation schemes. We can add more user friendliness to the system so that on the fly you can change these parameters. And finally, research is happening here in area reduction, especially in the design of the control module. There is an idea of clustering multiple processing engines in a single unit. These are the references that are used for the diagrams and the thesis.